Hi, my name is Ariel Anderson. I am the author of Under Your Scars, and I am here on the Love Letters and Books podcast today to talk about my newest book, Entombed, and what I have coming in the future.
Welcome back to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books, where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I am sitting down with author Ariel Anderson to discuss her mythic romantic tragedy, Entombed, which for me was a 5-star read. We're exploring so many themes in Ariel's writing today, including being the outsider, tenderness, loneliness, relationships that nurture us, connection and communication, as well as what helps us navigate some of the hardest moments in our lives. We're also exploring the genre of romantic tragedies and what tragedies can teach us. Ariel also talks about her upcoming releases and shares a spontaneous love letter to the listener who needs a little help saying yes to themselves. Ariel, welcome back to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
I am so happy to be back. I had a blast the last time we were here, and I'm happy to be back.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. People were so responsive with your episode. I think that the things you shared really hit home with people who had read your work, really resonated with Under Your Scars, and I just really appreciated how you explored it. And I am so glad you're back joining me today to talk about the book I just finished, which was Entombed, your recent release. So before I say anything else, I would just like to say, Ariel, what magic did you put in that book? Because I couldn't put it down. And I open books. I don't really go in. I don't really read the trigger warnings or anything. It just doesn't. It's fine for me. I don't mind. I just kind of go in, and I could not put this book down. So yeah, just what magic was in the pages?
I don't necessarily think it was magic. I think that it was written in third person, which is different from my previous works. And I actually have said that I think I'm a lot stronger writing in third person as far as like my prose goes. But I also acknowledge that it's not maybe as marketable as some other, because I know a lot of people in the romance space just don't they don't really like reading third person. So it's a little bit of like a balance of like, do I, don't I? But I'm glad I did it because I think for the specific story that I was trying to tell, I don't think that it would have hit the same if I had done it like from the character's point of view. I like taking the like omniscient overhead look at things. And so you could kind of like tell what all the characters were feeling at one time without really having to guess like how anybody was going to react. I don't know, I just really enjoy it. My next book is also going to be in third person, so I'm really excited about that one. It was definitely a little bit of a risk taking because my first fantasy that I did was not exactly a hit, but this one I think definitely has a lot better reception and people really resonated with this story. So I'm very happy that I took the plunge on it.
Oh, incredible! And I love that you're bringing up writing in the third person because it was so strong. The writing. I'll just say that as someone who loves your work, I felt like I was fully immersed in the story. And that is something that sometimes people say with third person, like sometimes they can't get into it. I was in it, and I felt like it worked so beautifully for their story. So, for anyone listening, can you give us just a little overview of Entombed?
So I took an approach of I was trying to do a retelling of the classic ballet Swan Lake. It's one of my favorite ballets, and if you don't know the story about Swan Lake, because some people don't, is this princess or this commoner in some forms. She gets turned into a swan by an evil like sorcerer in the forest, and a prince comes and falls in love with her as she's a swan. In some interpretations, she switches back and forth between a human and a swan, and in some interpretations, she's just a swan the whole time. With Entombed, I wanted to keep his animalistic traits very prevalent, but I also felt like it wasn't really the story for like a full like monster romance, if that makes sense. And I think it was kind of a tender moment in the book when he kind of, as he grows and connects with the main character Elowen, he takes on more of her traits. So that's kind of the direction I was trying to go. I was trying to retell Swan Lake, but in a way that was just a little bit more focused on the animalistic side of it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I love that you mentioned ballet. I talk about it on this podcast a lot. I was a ballerina for a long time. And so anytime someone takes inspiration and weaves that into the story, it just really resonates for me. I want to talk a little bit about some of the themes that came up in this book because I thought it was interesting. You addressed some big themes, and it's in this. Am I going to use the right word? Is it fantasy? Like, how would you categorize this? I don't want to use the wrong word. So
Yeah, I've been calling it like a mythic romance or a fairy tale retelling. Either one of those. I don't really. I mean, it is fantasy, but like I feel like fantasy. When you say fantasy romance, that comes with kind of a different connotation. So I like the term mythic romance for
I
this
like
one.
that term too. We're going to use that. I just wanted to make sure I was describing it correctly. Because it's outside of the genre that I generally read. And I was fully immersed in this story and found so many relatable themes. And I just love how you work them in. So I would like to just drop in on the initial one. We're talking about two main characters who, for their very own reasons, are outsiders in
Mhm.
society. And why does that make for such a good character right off the bat? Like, why do we engage so much with them?
Well, I feel like in a lot of ways, a lot of us can relate to that feeling of being an outsider, at least at some point in our life. Maybe not always and maybe not now, but at some point in our life, I feel like we can all kind of relate. And in that same sense, I feel like a lot of my themes for the next few books that I've been writing, including this one, is kind of about like human cruelty and how cruel we can be to each other and to things that we don't understand. And so I feel like that's kind of one of the reasons why this book felt so relatable because again, especially as like book readers, I feel like a lot of us can relate to that feeling of like just feeling misunderstood and wanting to be understood by somebody fully and not being judged. So I feel like that's why this book specifically is resonating with a lot of people, even though it's not like your typical like contemporary romance. And it's not really even a monster romance in the same sense that people really think about them. And I don't know, I really enjoy writing books that people can relate to in some sort of like more abstract way, as opposed to like just being like the character there's is a relatable character,
Yeah.
but in the sense of like because of the circumstances of their life rather than like their personality. I don't know. I really enjoy writing, I guess, about the cruelty of humans in a sense. I don't know what that says about me, but I really like that, and I like kind of having specifically in romance two characters that are outsiders really connect with each other and accept each other for who they are, despite the way that they've been treated. Because some people say like you're kind of a victim of your own circumstance, and if you were raised in this, for example, with Elowen, if you're raised in this cruel village, there's kind of this expectation that you're going to be cruel too, and she kind of subverts that expectation. And that's also a big theme in the book is Midas learning to trust her because humans have been so cruel to him. So he's like, how is she any different? I don't understand. Like, I cannot fathom why this human is so different. And I think that's why their love story is kind of so like unique in its way of she is the thing he should be the most afraid of, and he's the thing she should be most afraid of, but somehow they find love in each other, and it ended up being a really beautiful story, however tragic. But I really like writing those kinds of themes.
Well, listen, you had me relating to a dragon. So let's just take a look at that. But you're saying it, and I'm thinking as I read the book, you were addressing so many different things that people could relate to in their own lives, believe it or not, in this setting, and a different way of navigating it. So let's just talk about connection and communication
Mm.
because these two connect and communication is an instant barrier, right?
Right.
And yet still finding that common ground, finding a language, and I'm using quotes, no one can see that, but a language in which we can communicate. So why was that also part of this story? I mean, obviously, humans and dragons can't speak the same language, but I'm saying, why was the communication barrier part of the story and how did it shape their relationship, do you think?
Well, when you think about Midas, who is this obviously a creature, an animal, and does not like humans for very understandable reason. The reason I included this sort of language barrier in the beginning is because I wanted it to be a source of like comfort for them. And I'm paraphrasing myself here, but somewhere like right after they kind of start connecting to each other, Eloin and Midas, I said something like he couldn't understand her words, but he understood like her tone and her cadence, and that helped him understand that she wasn't like a threat to him. And then, as the story went on, he understood a little bit at a time, just a few words, and then he started forming very simple sentences. And then, towards the end of the book, he could speak, like you and I can speak. And I just think that's another level of him showing his commitment to her and her showing his commitment to him, especially when they found out that she couldn't like replicate his language with her throat because she just had a different vocal structure, obviously, than an animal. So I think that was a source of sadness for him because obviously he wanted to communicate with her in that way. But at the same time, like that was kind of his like final transformation of like, I'm committing myself to being this more human part of me, even though I don't like humans, for this person that I love. And I think that's very special and very touching for this story because, I don't really see a lot of, or at least I personally haven't read a lot of books where that is kind of a barrier. Like if one of it in the books that I've read, if a character can't communicate, that's kind of like they don't communicate through the whole book, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like for example, in Archer's Voice, they communicate primarily or only really through sign language. But in this book, I really wanted to kind of have him develop his speech as time goes on. And fun fact, I'm going off on a tangent here, but fun fact, when we were doing the audiobook casting and I was talking with Blue Nose Audio about like what the characters needed to sound like, I actually suggested at some point like Midas would in the beginning speak with a generic American accent, and then later on in the book, he would develop a more kind of British sounding accent because that's the accent that Elowen speaks in. And I thought that would have been a really unique kind of touch to the audiobook, but we ultimately decided it might be a little bit confusing for people who maybe didn't like pick up on that very small detail of like
Yeah.
him developing his language through her. And like, when people live in another country, they start to develop a slight accent. So we didn't end up doing that, but I just thought that would have been a really cool sort of like Easter egg for the people with like a really keen eye and a keen
Yeah.
ear to be like, oh, he's really developing this language and how to speak for her, and he's kind of taking on her traits. And I think that would have been really cool, but you got to make some sacrifices for the ease of the reader and helping them understand like what you're trying to go at. You can't like throw a whole bunch of things at them and this random concept of like why is he suddenly talking in a British accent at the end of the book, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
but anyway, I that was a very important part of the book to me was to have him develop her language. I tried to really make it like very consistent throughout the book, especially like it's a little bit difficult when you're trying to communicate with each other and trying to keep it consistent of like okay, in the beginning he can't really speak very good sentences or he only knows a few words, and then in the middle he can kind of speak, but sometimes he doesn't use the correct like
Hmm.
phrasing, and then at the end he can speak in full sentences, and then he obviously at the end he has his children to translate for him back and forth. But I think that was a very important part of their relationship, and a very important part of his commitment to Elowen was his commitment to learning her language and speaking to her in that way, especially knowing if you've read the book, you know that when he transforms into his human form it's very painful for him. So I think that again just shows his commitment to her.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. I always love the tidbits you share when you come on this podcast, those little gems that we would not know unless you kind of shared your secrets. Well, another theme that came up in the book that I thought was so beautifully done, and it's those bittersweet moments. It was like the theme of loneliness and the
Mhm.
way you wrote about it. And they have their own, right? I mean, Elowen has her own journey prior to meeting him, but he's been alone for a really long time. And there's a lot of things that happen when you're alone. Even as humans, even as adults, no one talks about loneliness. It's not a conversation. And if you bring it up, there's almost this feedback of like you've done something wrong, like
Mhm.
you need to do something to fix it, right? But loneliness is something that's actually a pretty common thing that goes on for people. And so he'd been alone for so long, like that's part of the book, and then his life gets very full, and I just wanted to know, why was that so key to his character and his journey? And I don't know, like, what did that add to their relationship? Like the fact that he had been alone for so long prior to meeting her.
Yeah, I think in the same way with his language, it was very important that he kind of expressed to Elowen that he was lonely. And it's not like, as soon as he met her, he was never lonely again, because obviously he went through things, with her and his family that still made him feel alone. Because again, he is the last dragon. He had nobody, his entire family was gone. And, he's living in a world with people that want to kill him and want to end his entire existence. And so that's a very, very heartbreaking place to be, I think, for him. And so when he meets Elowen, who is also experiencing this loneliness, but I think in a very different way, like, I think we can all agree that, like, loneliness from being the last of your species versus loneliness of just being kind of like an outcast in your community are two very different, like, levels of loneliness. And I think that they really needed each other to kind of come out of that. And I'm paraphrasing my own self here, but it's very reminiscent of Under Your Scars, I think, in the sense that, like, Christian was also a very lonely person, and, throughout his relationship with Elena, he kind of learned to accept that, like, that was part of who he was, and without that, he wouldn't be who he was. And I think that's kind of the same for Elowen and Midas. Elowen was this outcast because she wanted, a different life than everybody else, and she was more compassionate than everybody else. And so when she found this creature in Midas that she could really, like, express her true self with, I think that was very healing for her. And then for Midas, obviously, because he had literally nobody, nobody at all. Like, nobody could speak with him, nobody was nice to him. I mean, not that they knew that he existed for a long time, but you know what I mean? Like, he literally had nobody, and so I think it was probably a very, very huge breath of relief to finally just have somebody, even in that first moment when they meet and they meet eyes and he's staring at her like, I don't even know what to do. And like right after that, he goes like, I'm such a fool. Like, why did I do that to myself? Because like now I'm scared that they're gonna come after me. They know I exist now. Like, and then she doesn't end up like selling him out, so he's very confused. And again, like, you have to remember that he is an animal at this point. He's not transformed into his human form yet. He's not communicated with Elowen in any way. So he only really has his past to go off of. So I don't know. I think that's a very beautiful part of like Elowen kind of being his friend before she was his lover in the beginning, where they just kind of just were together, and they didn't really like, she just talked to him and they didn't really have conversations, but he was learning like who she was in a very slow kind of way. And then like obviously once she kind of went to his cave, things picked up the pace from there. But in the beginning, I think that she was very understanding of his reluctance to trust. And I think that is a really big part of why their love was so deep, is because he found that trust in her.
Mm, thank you for that explanation. Well, then we also think about his name, right? The origin of his name, and it's very tied into his behavior. And I did think it was interesting how, and I hate to use the term, and you can like, I'm quoting it as I say it, but like love language, right? At
Mhm.
first, he was finding items and trinkets, and then slowly his love language shifts into this very soft, nurturing, day to day, slowing the pace down and like and doing the things that would make life easier. And
Mhm.
I was just thinking about that theme in books, right? You know, this book, but in general in writing, when we read about those things and it kind of hits us in a place of like, oh, I don't need a flashy car, but I do need a very like safe, regulated home. And it's like
Yep.
when someone can really get that from you, like picks up on that and almost shifts their behavior. It's like, oh, I'm looking at who's in front of me and I'm giving them what they need. And even just the simple act for him of like holding a water bowl so she can drink from it, like that's just not something he's ever done. So
Mhm.
let's just talk a little bit about that, about the nurturing that goes on in this book, because, yes, it's sort of the two of them against the world, but it could have gone in any direction, and it gets to this very like soft, safe place.
Yeah, and I think, for that part, you have to really pick up on the fact that dragons were a very matriarchal society. Like, the female dragons were very, very important. They were the leaders of the pride. They were very respected in his culture, and he expresses that multiple times throughout the book. But obviously, Eowyn didn't know that at first. She had to learn that through being with him. But I think that's where that nurturing part came from him because, like, obviously in the beginning, he was stealing things from the humans because he didn't like them and he wanted to steal things from them as they stole from him. But, when Alwyn comes along, and I think the very first time where he's like, I need to take care of her is when he notices how thin she is and how like emaciated she is because her village obviously doesn't feed them well. And so he's like, well, I need to feed her. I need to provide for her because she is, this important part of my life, and I need to show her that through the only ways that I can right now. And I think that that is just kind of left over from the ancient days of like when he was growing up. Obviously, he was very, very small when the dragons were wiped out, but I think that really goes to show just how like ingrained in dragon culture women or females were. I think that is very special. And I think as women, we can kind of relate to that feeling of like just wanting to be taken care of, even if it's not all the time. But I think we all kind of crave that feeling of like somebody sees that we need something and they take care of it without us having to ask. I think women, especially, can relate to that feeling of just kind of wanting that. And I really wanted it to reflect the matriarchal society that he was a part of because it really could have been, the complete opposite where she could have just taken care of him and, it still would have been a fine story, but I think that that extra layer of complexity really made it something special and more relatable because again, we all kind of crave just, sometimes we just want to lay down and have somebody take care of us and I think that he took that very seriously. And obviously, Elowen never asked for that, and I think that's something that's very important to him also, is that she never asked to be taken care of, and in some parts of it, she actually said, "Please stop because people are getting suspicious of I'm gaining weight because I'm being fed," and he obviously gets upset at that because he doesn't understand. He's like, "Well, yeah, I'm feeding you. Of course, you're important to me, and, like, why would they take that away from you? That doesn't make sense to me," and so I think that's very, very beautiful, and again, the story is very tender in a lot of ways, but I think that those moments of him really taking care of her in a way that's like very ancient and traditional for him is just one more layer that makes the story just a little bit more special.
Oh, definitely. And you see it in so many of the things that he does. At one point, she's harmed, and even the way he takes care of her and her wounds, all of those things. And as you were just talking right now, I was thinking about, all right, so what's my version of that? And I was like, you know what it is? It's like when I take a nap after work and I wake up and I smell food being cooked in the kitchen. I'm just like,
Mhm.
it's that, oh, that feels so nice. Anyway, that's what your entire book was like. So even though this book is, as you've categorized it, more of like a mythic romance, there were so many very relatable real life things that you were weaving through the story. And one of them really stood out. And it was noted in your trigger warnings, and it was the topic of miscarriage. So I'm just saying that right now, verbally, if that's triggering for anyone, it's a good time to stop listening or fast forward a little bit. But I did want to highlight it for some specific reasons. Number one, I thought it was really, really interesting that this mythic romance tragedy with dragons addressed miscarriage better than most doctors do. And the way you touched on it was so beautiful. And I could see, even for someone who had been navigating, like it was healing, I think, in a little bit to read about it like this because you were not glossing over it. I felt like you were dropping into the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional feeling of it. and what that's like in partnership and what that's like in a family dynamic. Because
Mhm.
sometimes, and everyone has a different experience, but sometimes the feeling is it's not that big of a deal. It does not matter. Be quiet about it. And that whole experience just dissolves the moment you learn about it. All of those
Mhm.
things are not true. Everyone has a unique experience with it, and it can be incredibly difficult. So I wanted to explore it with you because, yes, I feel very safe reading your writing anyway. You and I talked about that the last time. You can touch on very complex topics and you write about them so beautifully and compassionately that people feel safe. But this was very specific and surprising, given the setting of the story and all of these things. So, why that choice?
Well, I think you have to back up a little bit because I also, in that same vein, it was very important to me to have a quote graphic birth scene
Yeah.
in the book because I feel like that is also something that is glossed over in romance. And I get it, like, everyone has a different comfort level of things, and maybe in some romance books you don't want to read about like very graphic and potentially triggering birth scenes, but that was very important to me just because one, this is a setting where it's, old-timey and, she didn't have a lot of like modern medical care. She's essentially alone in this cave trying to deliver this child. She doesn't know if it's more human or more dragon. And then obviously Midas is trying to help, but it's said throughout the book that her distress makes it hard for him to be in his human form, and so he is also feeling this kind of shame of not being able to be there for her in a way that's, like, very comforting for her because I'm sure in that moment, she was like, I need to hold you as like a man as opposed to a dragon. And I feel like that would have been comforting for her. And so that was very important to me to kind of include that because not everybody's birth is sunshine and rainbows. And, sometimes those things can be very graphic and very hard on a woman's body. Or birth in all senses is hard on a woman's body, but you know what I mean? Like, some births are a lot more difficult than others, and I think in this kind of setting, it was important that it wasn't just, like, super easy, and there was this, like, primal animalistic thing about it. Because again, we're talking about Midas is an animal, so it was very important to have that in there, and then as far as the miscarriage goes, I really debated. I really went back and forth on if I wanted to include that for a long time, like, even before I sent it off to, be recorded for the audiobook. I told the, producers, I was like, "I don't know if I'm gonna include this, so I'm just putting it up there as a trigger warning just in case for, like, when we were casting the narrators because I didn't wanna, like, hire them and then blindside them later."
Yeah.
So I was like, it's something that, needs to be considered, but it might potentially be removed. The reason I think I ended up keeping it is because, again, like, I feel like in romance fiction, those things are still kind of glossed over, and it's something that a lot of women can unfortunately relate to, and I feel like you said, we're kind of expected to just get over it in a way, and we're supposed to, we take our moment to grieve and then, life is back to normal and, nobody really talks about it, even potentially your own partner is not willing to talk to you about it. And so I really wanted it to be a moment of like grief for her and Midas as a couple. And then like you also said the family unit, because again, I mean I don't have kids of my own, but hopefully soon. And I wanted also to include the moment of her children asking questions, like very real questions I feel like children would have, especially in a very like close knit family like that, because I also feel like in fiction that's really not talked about. It's like those questions, however innocent, can also still be kind of painful for a parent to answer. And so I tried to approach it in a very tender way of like, obviously they wanted to know because this was a very important, very exciting part of their lives. They're going to have a sibling, and then all of a sudden they're not going to have a sibling anymore and they don't really understand. And so in their trying to understand, their questions can sometimes be a little bit touchy or hurtful, not that they intended it to be that way. And I think that's why I included both scenes where they were talking to Elwyn about it, and she was like, like yes, it hurts, but you are allowed to ask. Like, I'm not going to hide things from you. And then they went to Midas with more, I guess, like blunt questions because they knew they couldn't go to her. And he also went on to explain, like, this is a very, serious thing. And you can't just ask her to have another baby. Like, she needs time to heal mentally, emotionally, physically. Those are all things that are very important. And I feel like, again, unfortunately, a lot of women can relate to that feeling of like, that is a moment, I think, in a lot of women's life where, again, we feel alone and we feel like there's no community to help us through that. And I really wanted it, I kept it in there because I wanted it to be a moment of like, yes, they have this beautiful family that what they want to grow, but like they also are two very different creatures. And, sometimes things go wrong and, you can't really explain it, and I didn't intend. It's not like I didn't add it for shock value is what I'm trying to say. I added it
Oh,
for a very
yeah.
specific reason of, like, this another level of being relatable, but, like, in a very tender way and also a very, just things that a lot of romance fiction doesn't really touch on is those hard-hitting moments. Like, they might have one, scene where the 2 main characters are talking about it in depth, but they're not really, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It's approached in a way that is painful, but also healing. It just like those questions are very hard to talk about, but they're also things that people go through. And so I just wanted, I guess, to give a shout out to the people who have gone through that to be like, there is love out there for you, and even though maybe we're discouraged to talk about it publicly, it can be very healing to just know that you have a family unit that is very supportive, and I know that not everybody gets that, and so I wanted maybe if somebody out there who has not had that feels a little bit more seen in this kind of in that scene of the book, just I don't know, I like when people read my books and feel seen, whether that's in a very prominent way or it's a very subtle way. I want to be relatable, but I don't want it to be like an in your face kind of relatable thing. Like I don't want to spell it out for my readers. I want them if they feel like they related to my characters, it's because of those subtleties and those subtle scenes that, you know, if I left them out, the story would have been fine, but because I kept them in, that subtlety really just touches people in a more special way.
Thank you so much for explaining all of that. And it really came through in the pages. And it's interesting. One of the things that I think is missing around maybe the topic of loss in whatever form it takes, but in this case, we're talking about miscarriage, is seeing your partner differently in those moments when you're in that moment. And again, it's different for everyone, but it could be absolute devastation.
Mhm.
And that's the moment where this is the only other person on earth who's really getting it as much as you. And it's just, there's that tenderness there. And I felt like the tenderness really came through in your writing. And so it's an interesting thing when something can be triggering and at the same time can also be really healing when it's done a
Mhm.
certain way and you get to see it a certain way. And something I actually talked about in 2 other recordings this week was
Mhm.
the power of sometimes seeing something you've never had. And so there's probably so many people out there, and if anyone's listening who's had this experience where your miscarriage was private, misunderstood, ignored, downplayed, dismissed, whatever it was, and you have that moment where you're reading about this experience and it's like, "Oh, that's what that would have been like." And it can be really beautiful to experience that through the pages, even if we have not experienced that in real life. So I just wanted to say thank you for going deep in these topics because I felt like this was a book that really addressed a lot of experiences that women have. And yes, it's like in the mythic setting, but maybe that makes it almost easier for us to drop in, not with our barriers or armor, but to drop into this story where there's so much love and tenderness and yearning and nurturing going on. Yeah, I guess that's just my little reflection. So I'm not trying to give you a pat on the head. I'm just
No,
saying that
yeah.
I really loved it and thought it was so beautifully done. And it's something maybe I'm a little sensitive about. I work in medical media and women's health is a huge priority of mine. And
Mhm.
I put a lot of effort into making sure I'm putting out media that's, addressing stillbirth, miscarriage, all of these things that affect women that we're told to ignore. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate that in this book, that was something very unexpected and healing. So,
Because Midas was part of this matriarchal society, we can kind of focus more on like the woman's experience in this book. I mean, obviously, we all love reading about the male characters and the way that they feel, but I also feel like in a female forward romance book, it can be very healing to read about a society that really respects its women and respects their roles in the family unit. I don't know, I just think that that was very important to me, that that was a very, like, forward-facing theme of the book, because I wanted women to feel like the women that read it, I wanted them to feel like, even though maybe they haven't gone through these specific circumstances, that the book itself understood the female experience.
oh, I think that really came through. And I'm always so grateful when I have the opportunity to read books like that. So, one of the other things about this book is that it is a tragedy. And we all know that going into it. And even though we get very caught up in the story and how beautiful and tender it is, at the end, and I'm not giving anything away, it's out there, it is a tragedy. So I want to ask you about that because in reader spaces, even, messages I get on this podcast, when I do episodes about tragedies, it's like, why couldn't it have just been this? Why couldn't you have ended it like this? And why couldn't it have gone that way? So I want to ask you, what is the power of a tragedy?
I think that the power of a tragedy, and I've been saying this since Under Your Scars, because Under Your Scars is obviously like what I'm known for. That tragedy is obviously what I'm known for. And Entombed is a tragedy. The End Unseen, which is my next book coming out in April, is also a tragedy. One, I think that I just kind of, not that I want to say that it's my brand, but I kind of like I think, excel at the angst of leading up to a tragedy. Like, I don't know if this makes sense, but like, as a writer, I feel like it's a lot easier for me to end a book in tragedy than it is to like have somebody go through all of this angst and then kind of slow things down and go to a happy ending. I don't know if that really makes sense, but anyway, I say all that to say that I think the power of a tragedy is that you can still find beautiful, beautiful love in the story, even though there is a tragedy at the end. And I've been saying this since Under Your Scars. Just because it's a tragedy at the end does not discount all of the beautiful love and understanding and things that they went through together. Like, that doesn't negate that. Like, you can still have a beautiful, well rounded love story or romance and end it in tragedy. And I feel like, again, on the topic of relatability, if you lose somebody that you love, that doesn't mean that the love was never there. And I think that that is what makes my specific tragedies so popular when I write them and well received, is because people feel like, oh, like it's okay to acknowledge that that love existed, even though that there was a tragedy. And some people aren't about that life, and some people just want to read romances for the happily ever after. And I also enjoy the occasional happily ever
Yep.
after, but I think that there is a very powerful message that can be had in appreciating the love that you have now and not waiting on that happily ever after, because tomorrow you never know what could happen. And I know this sounds so cliche, but like you could really lose everything tomorrow and you really don't know. So I think that really there's a lot of love to be had if you just live in the moment and appreciate what you have now as opposed to waiting to get to that happily ever after. And I think that's why it really resonates with readers, because they feel that. They feel all the love leading up to it and they feel like they worked hard for it. And then they get to this tragedy. And yes, it is heartbreaking, but also it's like, wow, the story was so beautiful leading up to that tragedy that, like, that one makes it hurt more, and two, it just makes you appreciate what they went through so much more and all the connections that you made along the way. I think that's why these tragedies speak so well to people, and again, they are like my most popular books are the tragedies, because that's just, I don't know, maybe it's because people relate to them, maybe it's because people are tired of the traditional HEA. I can't really say either way, but I personally think that it's because there is a lot of power in acknowledging that the love that you experience along the way is just as special as a happily ever after. And a term that we kind of coined during the Under Your Scars days, like audiobook days, was happily ever now. And I think that's a really good way to put it. It's like it's not happily ever after or it's not happy for now. It's happily ever now, right now.
Mm.
You're living in the moment, you're appreciating what you have, and you're living for the experiences that you've already had with this person. And I think that's why they speak to people so much.
Ariel, I love the way you just went so deep and unpacked all of that with us because some of these questions just really stood out to me as I was reading the book. I couldn't wait to talk to you about this. And then it got me thinking about something else because this book has such a beautiful romance in it, and yet there is no spice. And it made me think of something that a few months ago, I think you had put a question or something on Instagram about wanting a fantasy book with no spice. And I immediately mentioned an author I love, Tanya Torres, and she had this great book, and I wanted you to read it. But then I think within like 24 hours, there was a little bit of feedback maybe that you had gotten about that. And I want to touch on that and the choice to have a romance without that in Entombed.
Yeah, so I had posted on my story that I was just like I wanted to read romance, but I didn't want any spice in the romance because I and this is not like that big of a deal to say now, but I had a minor medical procedure and I just was not in the mood for spice. I was like, That's not my journey right now." Like, I want to feel, like, very comforted in a romance, but I also don't want the spice. And so I had asked for recommendations, and I did get a lot of really great recommendations, which I appreciate, but I also there was this, like, weird subsection of, certain people that, like, I guess took that the wrong way of, like, me saying that, like, spice was bad in some way, and I didn't really think that what I had said had given off that vibe at all. I was just like, "That's what I needed in the moment," but some people kind of, I guess, felt offended or, like, felt like I was, judging people for wanting spice, and that really wasn't, like, my intention at all, and it was a very small amount of people, and, I just kind of moved on with my life, but I that's there was nothing, like, nefarious about that. I just personally wanted a book with no spice in it. In that moment, I love spicy books. I read them all the time. I just, in that moment, didn't want one, and I don't know, I guess some people thought that I was judging them for liking spicy books, and I don't know how that went off the rails like that, but anyway, the reason I didn't put spice in Entombed was I really don't like writing spice. Like, I just like, it's not like, I'm fine with writing it in certain books, but it's just not my favorite thing to do. Like, I always save it till the very end. Like, I promise you the spice is the thing I spend the least amount of time on. I leave it, like, I just, like, put in little brackets, like, add spice here, and then move on with my life until I get to the very end because it's just not my favorite thing to write about. And then as far as Entombed goes, the story itself just didn't really call for spice. I mean, there was like a moment of there was a couple moments of like intimacy in there, but it wasn't like graphic spice. And I feel like that was just, I don't know, in a way I felt like that made the book a little bit more special in the sense of like I thought it was kind of hot. Like, I'm just gonna say it. I thought it was kinda hot to, like, address
It
that
worked.
intimacy
Trust me.
without it being, like, so in your face, like,
Yeah.
graphic, what what romance readers would expect, and I got a lot of really good feedback on that from my ARC readers saying that they really appreciated the break from the graphic spice, and I think, again, like, I'm not out here to change the romance space, but, I'm out here to write books that I wanna write, and that was, it was a conscious decision that I made to not include spice. And I think it ended up being really memorable to people in terms of like, you can still have a lovely romance story without the spice.
Mm.
And obviously, I have written spicy books, several of them. And obviously, one of them is my bestseller. But I don't know. I feel like there's this kind of like dichotomy in the romance space where you love spicy books or you don't love spicy books and those people don't cross over, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with, the occasional, needing a break from spice. So that's kind of just like what my thought process was with that. It wasn't really like any like again, it wasn't like a big fu to anybody who likes spice. It was just, just, the story just didn't call for it, and some stories just don't. But that doesn't mean I'm never gonna write spice again. So everybody can relax. I will eventually get back to it. It's just this story didn't call for it.
Oh, no, and I appreciate you talking about it. It's funny, a few months ago, I did an interview with the author Amber Cordova, and we were talking about diversifying our reading at every level and how powerful that is as a reader, as writers, I write too, and what that can do for you. And so this topic is perfectly aligned with that, and I really appreciate you going deep with that. So, you had mentioned the audiobook. Can you give us an idea of when that's coming out and where it will be available?
The audiobook for Entombed is going to be available on September 10th, 2026. I know that's a long wait period, but sometimes the schedules just don't work out. Sometimes you can't have a full release, and sometimes you can. But it's going to be narrated by June DeBorge and James Cassidy. June DeBorge did King of the Damned and Queen of the Wicked. She was the main female character in that book, and she's absolutely lovely. I love her. She's like salt of the earth. And then James Cassidy, this is actually my first book working with him, and I'm really excited because, again, another fun fact, I love sprinkling these in. When I had reached out to Blue Nose Audio to do these auditions, I was really having a lot of trouble finding a dragon. I was really having a lot of trouble casting Midas. It was like I had this very specific voice in my head, and I just could not find it. And we had so many auditions, so many amazing auditions. And I remember I sent a list to Blue Nose, like with certain names, and I had put like things that I specifically liked about them, but I was like, it's just not what I want. It's not hitting the way I expected it to. So I went onto my Instagram story and I had posted like some meme of some guy crying or some emoji crying. And I was like, I can't find a dragon. Somebody help me find a dragon. And instantly, I think there was like probably when it was all said and done, there were probably like 15 people that immediately messaged me and said, James Cassidy, James Cassidy, James Cassidy. And I was like, okay, well, clearly I need to reach out to James Cassidy. And June DeBorge had also mentioned him earlier in that process. So I was like, okay, well, I guess we need to hear what he's about because I had never listened to a James Cassidy book before. Some people had sent me little sound clips from other books that he had worked on. It's different when you hear it with your words versus somebody else's words.
Yeah.
And so I messaged Blue Nose and I was like, hey, is it at all possible if you could reach out to James Cassidy and see if he'll audition? And he did. He auditioned and it was great. It was amazing. And I was like, okay, well, the people clearly know what they're talking about when it comes to casting a dragon. So I'm really excited to hear that because his audition was good. It was great, and June's was also great. And secondary fun fact is that she actually submitted two auditions. She did one in like a generic American accent and one in a British accent. And so that's why Eowyn and Midas will have a British accent. It was because I thought her audition with the British accent was amazing. And so I don't know if James Cassidy has ever done a British accent in a romance book before, but be prepared for that if that's what you're into. If you're into James Cassidy and you like British accents, there you go. But I'm really excited. It's coming out September 10th, and I know that's a long time to wait, but it'll be worth it, I promise, for this book.
Oh, incredible. Thank you, Ariel. And I'm wondering, what are some of the other things coming up for you? Because obviously I follow you on social media, so I always see the posts and things like that. But for the listeners, can you kind of walk us through what's coming?
Yeah, so the next thing that's coming out is in April, which is right around the corner, literally right around the corner. On April 28th, I have another romantic tragedy. It's like a political fantasy slash romantic tragedy. It's called The End Unseen. It's very, obviously you can't predict the things that are going on in the world at any given time, but it's very inspired by the injustices that we see on social media and TV every day. There's this layer of like civil war and then like wars with other nations and then like the way that war affects innocent people. And so there is an element of romance in it, but it is really more of a political fantasy forward book. And then it's blended with romance and it is a big part of it, but I don't want people to go in thinking that, they're going to get an instant spicy book because that book also does not have any spice. Just fair warning to everybody, the Indian scene does not have spice. It has about the same as Entombed. It has kind of moments of intimacy, but they're not graphic. Has I think maybe one more than Entombed does. I can't remember off the top of my head, but anyway, I'm really, really, really excited about that one. One of the I had posted a kind of teaser clip of the audiobook that's coming, and it went like mega viral, like crazy viral, and I was like, I was not expecting that at all. So apparently people are really excited for the audiobook of this one, and I'm also very excited. And I'm working with some really, really talented voice actors on that. One of which I've been wanting to work with since Under Your Scars came out, so that's really exciting. And then after that, I had a series that was gonna start coming out on October 27th, but Sarah J. Maas decided that she wanted to publish her ACOTAR 6 on that day. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I better change my publishing date because that's not gonna happen anymore. So I don't know when that series is gonna come out. I don't know if I'll push it earlier or into 2027, but I have a 4 book series that is, kind of inspired by, like, Victorian era England, which is also kind of more of a political fantasy. There's no dragons or, like, anything in it. When I say political fantasy, I just mean that it's a fictional world. So that one's really exciting. It's more of like a coming of age story. It's about, a princess who's last in the line of succession, and basically, to make a long story short, something happens and she's thrust into this position of being queen. And the whole 4 book series is kind of about her like learning to be queen and all the mistakes she makes along the way. There's a love triangle in it, there's war in it, so it's gonna be a long and complex story, and that one I've been working on for a very long time. So I'm not 100% sure when that one is going to come out, but it will come out at some point. I also have book 2 of Venus coming out at some point this year. Venus was between a firefighter and a nurse. Book 2 is the same thing. It's like an interconnected standalone between 2 other characters that were in Venus. Don't know when that one's coming out again, but it will come eventually. Probably maybe like July or August-ish. We'll see. And then what else? Oh, yes, I do have another book coming out, but it's kinda gonna be a surprise. I have to keep it on the down low for this one because, like, the plot twist is, like, basically the whole book, so I gotta be careful about what I say about it, but that one is also kind of like there's like a it's gonna be a short story, and there's this battle that's happening, let's just say, and the plot twist is like I thought it was really clever, so I hope other people think it is. And that one's it's not really a romance, it's just kind of a fun short story. So that will come at some point this year too, and so I have a lot of stuff coming and very on brand with me to just publish whatever I want with no real direction or like consistency. But you know what? That's just, I'm having fun doing that. And I'm really excited, but I'm especially excited for the end unseen. I think that's probably my favorite project that I've worked on, probably since Under Your Scars. So I am very excited about that one. It's very inspired by Lord of the Rings and Warhammer, that franchise,
Yeah.
which my husband is very into, and he got me into it. I'm currently reading the books in that series. There's like a bajillion of them. I think there's like 70 books in that series. So I'm only through book 1, but we'll get there eventually. So I'm really excited about that. And I think that that book will kind of be another one of those like heavy hitters. Like I think that's going to be very popular in terms of like being different from like kind of like how Under Your Scars was kind of a little bit
Yeah.
different than what you would typically expect in a romance. I feel like the End Unseen is kind of in that same vein. Not it's not dark though. Not at all. Not at all. It's not
Yeah.
dark. I mean, there are heavy themes in it, but it's not a dark romance because I saw some rumors spreading online that it was a dark romance, and I was like, I never said that. I don't know where that came from, but not a dark romance, political fantasy, and it's between like a king and a refugee. So there's like this level of forbidden romance in it. So I'm really excited about it. That's coming on April 28th, full release. It will be paperback, ebook, audiobook, and then a hardcover, and it will also be on Kindle Unlimited. So
Wow. You have
I know
so
a lot of stuff.
much going
I
on.
feel like I just talked for like 17
No,
hours
it's
about all the
it's
stuff that's coming.
incredible. No, well, it's wonderful for people who love your work, and what an exciting year ahead. And I would love to sort of round out this episode with a little bit more of, I don't know, maybe like a personal question, because I was picking
Mhm.
up on some of the things you just shared, and I was hearing you talk about following almost like your own guidance, your intuition, your gut, and hey, I put out what I want and it makes me happy and I like what I'm writing. And I want to talk about that for one moment, not even
Okay.
about books, okay? Like, not even about books. We're just talking to the audience here. For anyone listening who's feeling like they're very disconnected from the ability to say yes to themselves, can you speak to them for a moment? Because I feel like you're a person, even the last time we talked, you shared quite a bit about that. And I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I am a kind of especially in my writing journey. I kind of during this writing journey have kind of really learned to kind of speak up for myself and stand up for myself in a way that I never really did before I published my book. And I think that just comes with like learning to take criticism and in a world where, people feel the need to tell you their every thought. But I think in terms of like just marching to the beat of your own drum, all I can really say to that is it is so freeing to just like you said, say yes to yourself and do the things that make you happy. Like I feel like we could all benefit from to sound very like chronically online, a little bit of whimsy in our lives where we just kind of just do the things that make you happy. I think that we all, especially nowadays and everything that's going on in the world, I think we all deserve to step back and say, I'm going to do something that makes me happy, whether that's writing a book that you want to write that, subverts whatever genre you're in, or that's watching a movie that you've never seen before, or going to do some experience that you've never done, or traveling, or like, I just feel like we can all benefit from doing the things that make us happy and being a little bit spontaneous with our lives. And I know that like people feel that that's very cliche of like, oh, you just need to like live in the moment and be spontaneous. But I really do genuinely think that there is something special to be said about when you give yourself the moment to just like be you. Like I always see like on the internet people saying things like, I'm not using my free will like effectively enough. And I think we can all benefit from like using our free will more effectively. And I mean, the only thing I really have to relate to that is my writing, but like I have a blast writing the things that I want to write. And whether those end up selling really well or not, I can say that I was proud of myself for trying. And I always say, like, I appreciate like my successes and my failures coming from my own brain and my own choices. And I think again, this is something that I probably never would have said before before I started publishing, but like I have a lot of respect for myself in that regard of like I'm going to do what I want to do whether it's successful or not, and like, you're either on this journey with me or you're not, and either way that's fine with me because I'm doing this for me and I've been doing it for me since Under Your Scars. And I feel like if you've been following me for a while, you absolutely know that Under Your Scars was, I mean, I've said this before, it was a suicide note and it literally changed my life. And, I just think back to like, if I had never published that book, like, where would I be now? I don't know. I might not even be alive at that point. So it's just like, do the things that make you happy, do something spontaneous, don't do anything dangerous. Like, not saying spontaneous equals dangerous, but like, those experiences that you or dreams that you've had in your life and you're like, I really want to do this or go travel to this place or publish a book or, start this new career or go back to school or whatever it is. Like, I think we're at a place in the world where we need to really take a look at ourselves and say, these are the things that make me happy and I'm going to chase them regardless of the outcome, because I think that's where you live the most special moments of your life is like on the journey to reaching whatever goal you're trying to reach. I mean, I've had some of the most amazing experiences of my life in this publishing journey, and it's only just getting started. Like, I've only been doing this for like, what, 3 years now? So it's like, I have so much longer to go, and I've had the time of my life and met amazing people, had amazing experiences, and I think that we all just need to stop caring what other people think about us and just go for it. Because let me tell you, when you stop caring about what people think about you, oh, your life is going to be so much better. Especially, and I know that's really hard to say when we're all in a society of being online, and trust me, like, I see the messages I get, like, some of them are not very nice, but you know what? You just block them and move on. Your life's so much better. Trust me, it's so much better. Just stop caring what other people think. Do things that make you happy, and you will never regret that. I promise you. You'll never regret doing things that make you happy.
Ariel, what a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much. I told you didn't have to do a love letter this time, but look at it. You did. And I really, really appreciate it. So thank you for joining us. And for anyone listening, I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes. And honestly, I put down Entombed and it was a 5-star read and I loved it. So I'm
Well,
so
thank
glad you're
you.
here with us today. And I hope you come back to talk about all of these incredible projects you have going on.
Yes, I would definitely love to come back, especially after the ending scene, because let me tell you, I have so much to talk about with that book. So,
Good.
if you want me back, just let me know. You know where to find me.
I definitely do. Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.